amazing God. May the thoughts that you have put on my heart be the right words for these your people. Many years ago, I was part of Gideon's International. And we used to hear stories like the one from noted author John Killinger. They were powerful stories about men and women. In Killinger's story, the man was all alone in a hotel room in Canada. He was in a state of deep depression. He was so depressed that he couldn't even bring himself to go downstairs to the restaurant to eat. He was a powerful man, usually the chairman of a large shipping company. But at this moment, he was absolutely overwhelmed by the pressures and demands of life. And he laid there on a lonely hotel bed, far from home, wallowing in self-pity. All his life, he'd been fussy, worrying about everything, anxious and fretful, always fussing and stewing over every detail. And now, in midlife, his anxiety had gotten the best of him, to the extent that it was difficult for him to sleep or to eat. He worries and broods and agonizes about everything: his business, his investments, his decisions, his family, his health, even his dogs. Then on that day, in that Canadian hotel, he cratered. He hit bottom. Filled with anxiety and completely immobilized, paralyzed by his emotional despair, he's unable to leave his room. And lying on his bed, he moans out loud, "Life isn't worth living this way. I wish I were dead." And then he wonders, what would God think if he heard him talking that way? Speaking aloud, he says, "Oh God, it's a joke, isn't it? Life is nothing but a joke." And suddenly it occurred to him that this is the first time he's talked to God since he was a little boy. He's silent for a moment, and then begins to pray. The man described the prayer like this: "I just talked out loud about what a messy life what a mess my life was in, and how tired I was, and how much I wanted things to be different." And you know what happened next? There was a voice. I heard a voice say, "It doesn't have to be that way." That's all. The man went home and he talked to his wife about what had happened. He talked to his brother, who was a minister, and asked him, "Do you think it was God speaking to me?" The brother said, "Of course, because that is the message of God for you and for every one of us. That's the message of the Bible. That's why Jesus Christ came into the world to save us, to deliver us, to free us from change, and to show us that it doesn't have to be that way anymore." A few days later, the man called his brother back and said, "You're right. It really happened. I've done it. I've had a rebirth. I'm a new man. Christ has turned it around for me." Okay, so the man is still prone to anxiety. He still has to work hard, but now he has a new source of strength. During the week, he often leaves his desk at work and goes to the church near his office. He sits there and he prays. The man said, "It clears my head. It reminds me of who I am and whose I am. Each time as I sit there in the sanctuary, I think back to that day in the hotel room in Canada and how lost and lonely and depressed I felt. And I hear that voice saying, it doesn't have to be that way." That sounds a lot like our gospel reading in Luke this morning. Christ walks into the tormented life of the Gerasene demonic, that madman whose life had come apart at the seams, and he turns it around. Jesus gives him a new beginning, a new start, a new birth. At the beginning of the narrative, the story sounds like a horror story. Wild-eyed, adrenaline-filled madman comes running and shrieking out of the tomb. He seems very unbalanced. He's convinced that he's being held captive by a whole legion of demons who are pulling and jerking him in every direction. It is an eerie, grim, suspenseful, and frightening scene. Jesus and his disciples have just come through a storm on the Sea of Galilee. The storm was at nighttime, and having survived that storm, they're thrilled to set foot on solid ground. And as they get out of the boat, they encounter a different kind of storm. Another scary experience. They hear those strange sounds coming from the tombs, shrieks and growls, screams, moans, the rattling of chains. Then suddenly that horrifying sight, a naked madman, bruised and dirty, bloody and battered, with pieces of chains dangling from his arms and ankles. The man came running out and screaming, moving directly toward them. So what would you have done in that situation? It was a perilous place, a blood-curdling moment. A powerful, dangerous, berserk man is charging. Most of us would probably run for our lives, or at least jump back in the boat to get out of there. But not Jesus. Jesus stood his ground and faced the madman, undaunted, unafraid. Jesus stood there and dealt with this wild man. Then he healed him. He brought peace to his troubled soul. He changed him. He cleansed him. He turned his life around. And you know, of course we know, that he can do that for us. Life doesn't have to be like that of the demonic from Gerasene. There are three conditions we might want to consider as being necessary to overcome fear. First of all, you don't have to be at war with yourself. It doesn't have to be that way. You'll notice that in Luke 8 and in 1 Kings, the Gerasene demonic, this madman, and Elijah were at war with themselves. The demonic man was hurting himself, bruising himself, injuring himself, and Elijah had given up on life. He was ready to die. It's not hard to imagine the depths of their despair. Some time ago, a young lawyer came to see his pastor, and he was down in the dumps at his wit's end. He said, everything's gone wrong. I've lost confidence in my professional ability. My wife has left me. I can't get along with my children. I'm cut off from my parents and my in-laws. I'm having conflicts with my co-workers. I've been drinking heavily. Everyone has left me, and I don't blame them. I've been bitter and hostile. I've done so many mean and cruel things, and now I have so many problems. And he literally said, my troubles are legion. He paused and took a deep breath, and he leaned forward and said to the pastor, to tell the truth, I think all those problems and troubles are symptoms. My real problem is that I don't like myself. And that taints everything I touch and do. The man is probably right. When you're at war with yourself, it smudges and distorts every relationship. On the other hand, when we feel good about ourselves, we're more loving, more patient, more thoughtful, more gracious toward everyone we see and interact with. Do you want to feel good about yourself? Do you want to see yourself as more loving? Do you want to stop bruising and hurting yourself? Do you want to be at peace within? Remember this: you are special to God. He loves you. You're extremely valuable to Him. God claims you as His child. You don't have to be at war with yourself. It doesn't have to be that way. You are special to God. And that makes you extremely valuable. Secondly, we don't have to be at war with other people. It may not seem that way. In Luke chapter 8 and in our Old Testament reading, Legion and the madman are very much at war with other people. The madman has been cast out of society, chained, shackled, and exiled to the tombs, constantly doing battle with other people. Here in this story, he runs out towards Jesus and his disciples looking for a fight. And the prophet Elijah is at war with Jezebel. He's run away from that fight and given up on his chances for survival. Isn't it amazing how crossways and estranged and hostile people can get? One side